Normally we just talk a bit before we actually start going. You can ask any questions if you want, like, is there anything you want to know or anything like that, or are you just happy to get going?
Happy to freestyle it, boys. Happy to freestyle it.
Yeah, good. Yeah, legend. That's the way we like it.
Sounds good.
It's very good.
Every second of my time was a
All right. Hey, everyone. Welcome to our episode with Dylan. Before we get started, I'd like to shout out our sponsors, Elevate Marketing Group. If you need a website made, they're the guys you should get in contact with. We'll leave a link in description so you can check them out. I'll also say as well that I am pretty sick today, so please forgive all my coughing and sniffing if you hear it. Ben, do you want to say hi?
Hello, everyone. Thanks for tuning back in again. Really appreciate it.
Sweet. So today we've got Dylan. He's the son of Paul Roos, who's an AFL legend, and he was the 2008 Father of the Year. Dylan's a masculinity coach and speaker. Do you want to tell us about your story, Dylan, who you are and what you're about and what you do?
Yeah, boys. Thank you very much for having me on. At the moment, currently, I mentor young men, so aged about 14 plus, in my Prince to King mentoring program. And I've been working with men for about 5 years now, almost 5 years, and absolutely love it. Just froth this space. It's a really interesting time right now for masculinity and for the men's space just in general. And, you know, I'm super passionate about this work for a couple reasons, mainly because I have been through my own battle with depression and anxiety and understand what it's like to feel alone, to feel like you don't have the answers, to feel like the world's kind of caving in around you. And my personal journey through that was one of, you know, just really poor habits. And I think that is super common with a lot of people, is that they're just not taking care of themselves. They're not checking in with themselves. And so a lot of the mental illnesses and a lot of the mental health crisis, if you will, can be resolved without the need for pharmaceutical drugs. And I'm a big advocate for just, you know, taking back the power or taking back control over one's life and really doing the best that you can to wake up each day and really get after it, attack it, and take better care of your mental health. So that's a massive reason as to why I'm passionate about the space. But also, just as I said, it's kind of a really interesting period right now for masculinity and for men, and a big part of the conversations mainly focused around toxic masculinity. And I'm sure we can touch on that maybe later on. But, you know, I'm just a massive believer of highlighting the healthy side of masculinity, the healthy benefits, and everything good associated with masculinity. And it really, you know, upset me pre getting into the work. I was like, geez, why is the only conversation about men one that's toxic? And so being able to step into the work and step into this space and shine a potentially new light that a lot of people haven't been listening to or hearing to is something that I'm also really passionate about.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, something that I was thinking about recently is a lot of people are very quick to say that there's toxic masculinity, but really it's actually toxic to think that an entire, to think that masculinity in its entirety is toxic. That kind of, there goes one of my coughs, but that kind of thinking isn't helpful for everyone, you know. And there's young men that you're coaching as well that are just trying to find their feet, and they're making mistakes, and then they're instantly getting labeled as this or that. Not to say that they shouldn't they shouldn't be blamed for making mistakes, but it's so easy nowadays to just completely dismiss a guy that's trying to figure out who he is and how to fit within society. So I think it's really good as well that you're coaching people. You've been doing that for 5 years, you said. So is that something you got into after uni? I know that in your personal story as well, whilst you were at uni, I think you're having issues with alcohol and that kind of thing, and then you kind of transformed your life after that. So share on that.
Yeah, so grew up just thinking that I'd play sport. I was pretty high level AFL, pretty high level basketball, and so I just always presumed when I thought about my future and when I thought about my life, I'll probably do something in sport. And then 18 rolls around pretty quick, and I didn't get drafted. And then I was, for the first time, really hit with that question of like, what do I want to do with my life? So I went and studied at university. I studied a Bachelor of Sports Management, but didn't enjoy it. And when I was 20 years old, went through a bad breakup with my girlfriend at the time. And that was the start of my mental health decline, where I just didn't take care of myself. I didn't handle that breakup well. I didn't have the tools, the knowledge that I have now. And so breakup happened, and I did what most men do, or what most young men do, and I just drank and fucked my feelings away and said I was fine, and get over it sort of mentality. And then 6 months later, again, I was probably drinking 3 times a week, which it wasn't too uncommon. It wasn't like I was drinking alone in my bedroom. It was with my mates. I was 20 years old, but it was really just to suppress what was going on underneath the surface. And so 6 months later, I found that I couldn't get out of bed for a week. And that's when I put my hand up and saw a psychologist. I was like, okay, this isn't just a hangover anymore. There's something else going on here. Saw a psychologist, and that's when I started to get help and moved from Sydney down to Melbourne, and really, I guess you would say turn my life around, or at least just turn my habits around, and started to take my health a lot more seriously, and started thinking a bit more seriously about my purpose and what I wanted to do in life. And then fast track, about 5 years is when I first started working in the men's space with my dad. We started a business together called the Roos Men's Wellness and Leadership Club, where we targeted business leaders, CEOs, managers, directors, and really challenged them on their wellness habits. So our first event was like a 50 bloke breakfast where we did yoga, meditation, and then had a couple business speakers, and and then we did about 5 events. COVID shut it down. I'd started another business with a couple mates at the time, which I've just left. And then in October 2020, I started my mentoring of young men in the Prince to King program.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, I want to go back to what you said there. I think what you might have said may have gone over people's heads, but I like that minor correction you made where you said, I changed my life around. Well, I changed my habits around. That's really important that you've raised that, because that is what then changes your life around. And a lot of people don't realize that. It takes those small steps and those small habitual changes to then make a bigger impact in your life. And I'm sure as a process, it wasn't something that you just changed everything from day one. I'm sure that you've, slowly picked up better habits and learned new things. And obviously having the Australian Father of the Year, that would probably help you as well, right? And that would also help you being able to give advice to other people. Why can't my dad win an award like that?
I mean, it wasn't an overnight thing where I was just like, okay, yep, time to turn everything around and tomorrow I'll be feeling better. It was very much a gradual improvement. I am just like everyone else, where like I struggle with, okay, I want to do something. Why aren't I doing it? I said I would get up at 4 a.m. to go to the gym. Why am I not doing that? And so understanding the science behind habit creation really helped me implement new good habits that I then just built the foundation off of. But for a lot of us, when just not taking care of ourselves, as I said, like if you changed your sleep habits, if you don't want to call it meditation, but if you spent 5 to 10 minutes just sitting in silence, if you spent 5 minutes journaling, and you exercised every day, chances are you're going to be feeling a fuckload better than you currently do. And so there is no magic pill. There's no thing that you just do once and you're amazing. It's like, it's just a continual grind, a continual wake up, do the same things every day. It's boring. It's not sexy. But you do it, and you do it consistently, then you will find improvements. And that's the same across anything. Like if you want to start a business, you have to do the same things day in, day out to start a business, and they're probably going to be pretty boring. You want to lose weight, you have to eat well, go to the gym. It's like none of these things are secrets. It's just a consistency aspect that a lot of people fall off of.
For sure.
Yeah, definitely. And I
what
think
you shared there
on
is
that
really good.
topic as well
Oh.
is overnight success. Oh, all
Ben,
good.
I think-
It's like
Yeah, I think you
nothing's an
dropped out
overnight
for a sec or
success.
something. I don't know. Are you all good there, Ben?
Can you hear me better now? Or
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah,
I
okay,
feel like
okay.
there might be a
Keep going.
delay
We'll push
on
through.
my end. Whoops. But yeah, we'll push it through. I think it's definitely not an overnight success. It is that constant grind and waking up every day knowing it's not going to be the best fun, but it's going to get the results done.
Yeah.
And in the
100%.
long run, it's going
And
to be
there's
so long
this
term, medium.
mentality nowadays of like the lone wolf mentality of like going it alone and doing it tough. And it's like back to what you mentioned around having my dad who he was, but it wasn't just my dad. It was my dad, my mum, my friends, mentors and coaches that I had along the way. So many people that end up impacting you, and that can either be in a negative way or a positive way.
Yeah.
But there's so many people that impact you along your journey that I don't even think there's such thing as like a self-made man or a self-made millionaire. You know, it's like that's fucking arrogant. You know, it's very unlikely that you're self-made. And certainly for me, I had such a great support network. I had so many role models, even looking back into my childhood and my teenage years where, you know, I was surrounded by some of Australia's greatest athletes at the Sydney Swans, and being able to just act as a sponge around them and really take in so much of what it meant to be a man, what it meant to be a successful man, and even like what does that mean to be successful. So I just feel like I'm so fortunate to have had the circles that I've had, both the good circles and the bad circles, because you can learn from the mistakes you make and the wrong people too if you take the right attitude towards it. So yeah, it's definitely not an overnight thing. And to the point again of what society looks like today, it glorifies success in a way where you don't see the hard work that people put behind the success.
Yeah, 100%.
You know, everyone, and even starting a podcast, right? Like everyone wants to be Joe Rogan, $180 million Spotify deal. It's like he was doing podcasts 15 years ago when no one knew what a podcast was.
Yeah.
And then, so that's not even an overnight success,
Yeah.
you know? So it's hard. It's whatever it is that you're trying to achieve, whatever change you're trying to achieve is going to be difficult. And I think a lot of people are expecting or wanting it to be easy or are looking for the easy path when the answers are right in front of them. It's the difficult path.
Yeah.
That's what makes it worthwhile.
100%. And it's the connections and community that you create along the way that really help you then make strides in what you're trying to achieve. And the more you're able to garner good relationships, beneficial relationships, and learn from different people in your life as well, the more you're able to push yourself forwards. I want you to touch on what you were talking about before, toxic masculinity, and your thoughts on that. I'll leave it pretty open so that you can kind of guide the conversation where you want to go, and then we'll just go from there.
Yeah, I mean, the main reason I don't really use the term or talk about it much is because what am I meant to do with toxic parts of myself, even if it's true? Like, toxic, you think of toxic, you think of radioactive waste that needs to be quarantined and you have to wear a hazmat suit to just go near. And when we're looking at, well, again, I personally think now where it's at, it is an attack on men where it is now. But let's pretend like I don't think that, and let's pretend like it did sprout from a good place, which I'm sure it did, which was how do we hold men accountable to poor behaviors, poor actions? Great. I'm all for that. That's what a lot of my work is holding men accountable to their actions and to their word. And if you're trying to hold them accountable to a higher standard, we know that shaming people into action is not going to work. It might bring about short-term change, but it's not going to bring about long-term change. So even if you say it and you're like, well, I use it because I want to help men, it's not getting that desired outcome. Because when you think of toxic, it's like I have to quarantine it and put it over here and put it in the corner and not look at it. So I use the term wounded masculinity because what I can do with wounds is I can heal my wounds. If there's something that I've experienced as a young boy that causes me to now act in an inappropriate manner as a man, great. I can go back and heal that inner child or heal that wound and become a better man for it. So I just don't think it gets the desired effect that it's after, even if you take out the theory or the thought that you think it's an attack on men, which at this current stage I think it is. But even if you remove that, it's still not getting you to the desired outcome of men joining the conversation. Because a lot of men hear that and immediately it's like, fuck, like what now? Or they check out of the conversation. And we want men in this conversation. Don't get me wrong. We want men looking at their behaviors, like reflecting back, going, how can I be a better version of myself? How can I be a better man? What does a modern man look like? And how do we navigate masculinity now with so much change over the last 20 to 40 years or so? And so we want men in this conversation because it's going to be men that drive the change. When you have a brotherhood of men around you or a group of men around you that are holding you accountable to a high standard, that's going to be the best way possible to elevating the whole sex of men or the whole masculinity conversation. So that's probably my main reason as to why I personally don't like it. I don't use it. Is it's just not. We're trying to get a desired outcome of men coming into the conversation and making change. Okay, using toxic masculinity, we've been trying for 20 years. It doesn't work. Let's stop fucking using that term.
Yeah, I think that's a really powerful point because it's a similar thing with racism, for example. Say I'm talking to someone and I say something and to them they don't like that. If they're going to immediately label me a racist, etc., it then creates more divide than unison. But if they come to me and say, hey, look, you said this thing, like you might have asked me a question about my race and actually that makes me feel uncomfortable. That then brings people together. And now I'm able to gain understanding. And it's the same thing with toxic masculinity, right? Everybody has toxic elements and everybody has the capacity to be toxic. Every human. So to just label someone, toxically masculine is quite rude and it's quite divisive. Whereas, and as you said, it's shaming, right? And we see it even on the flip side where women are trying to say, nobody likes being slut shamed. Nobody likes being shamed for their decisions on how many partners they have, etc., right? So what we have to do, especially as men, is, as you said as well, lead the change. So we have to realize, okay, look, these shaming tactics aren't working for either side. They're not working for anybody. So let's try and change the way we do things, right? And also, we need to be more conscious of who we are actually saying things to. What kind of relationship do I have with this person, right? So, for example, if I went to a random on the street and I just start telling them, look, you're fat, you're not good enough, etc., how is that going to be received? But if I have a really close friendship with a guy and I'm saying, hey, he's telling me he wants to lose weight, I'm saying, yeah, okay, you can do that, right? That's a completely different dynamic. One is supportive, where one is going out of my way to make other people feel bad. And one thing as well in this age of social media is I don't believe that people have complete awareness of the environments they're in and how and where they're saying things. And that has negative repercussions. You see it even years later. For example, I was talking to my colleague yesterday at work, and he was talking to me about how the new Prime Minister for the UK, videos have come out of him about like 10, 20 years ago when he was at uni, talking about how he doesn't have working class friends. He was making fun of working class people, right? And to him, he's saying that in a safe environment. But he's now been exposed for those thoughts even years later. So we have to be very conscious. Yeah. Is that something that you teach do you call them students or mentees,
My clients, I
clients.
guess.
Okay,
Yeah,
cool. Yeah.
clients. I mean, good decision making is well, the definition of good decision making has changed so much since the invention of the iPhone with a camera that follows you everywhere, right?
Yeah.
Now, to your point, where I'm with a couple mates hanging out, and I make a joke that's at best inappropriate, at worst sexist, racist, homophobic, whatever it is, right? But someone films it and puts it online. What kind of decision making process is that person going through versus the hindsight of, oh wow, I definitely shouldn't have said that to the public, but I thought I was just talking to a couple of mates, and this isn't actually my true thoughts, it was a joke, and rah, like so many different things. So it's definitely something that I touch on a lot is safe use of technology, really. Like that's what it is. But I got done for drink driving when I was 21 years old because of who dad was. It ended up making the paper and the radio station, and it really, I grew up with the mentality of everything you do reflects who you are. And I was like, and I thought I got that. I was like, yeah, I get that. Like, yep, okay, I get it. The family name, it's famous, whatever. And then that happened, and I really got it. And I was like, oh, okay, I get it. And you see it all happen all the time, where group text messages are leaked to the public, and there's horrible things being said in there. And so since my drink driving, I've really become hyper aware of everything that I say and do. And even then, there would be horrible stuff that I've said and done that, if not perceived through the right lens, would look horrible. And so what I despise is cancel culture, because if all of our skeletons were released from the closet, we'd all be fucked. Yeah. Like, we've all got skeletons. Yeah. We've all got things we're ashamed of. We've all got things we've said or done where we're like, geez, I shouldn't have said or done that. That was in poor taste. So I just think you have to be really careful when you start pointing the finger at other people. It's like, yeah, well, one day you could be on the other end, so be careful.
Yeah, but yeah, I 100%. I'm so sick, I can't even think. But I 100% agree with what you're saying there, and it's really good that you're teaching young men this, because they are the next leading generation. They are the next people in society that are going to be upholding societal values and making massive change. And so it's really important that these things are instilled from a young age, where you're becoming cognizant at 16, 17 that, hey, look, I have to be careful what I'm saying now. I have to be careful what I'm sharing with social media, because I know for me, myself as well, when I was that age, I wasn't aware of those things, and I wasn't aware that actually, views I hold today and things I hold today, we look at people like that lady, Drew Afualo, I think that's her name or whatever. They just, I don't know if you know her, but she roasts guys. She's like some TikTok lady or whatever, and she's one of the main people calling out toxic men and whatever. And she goes out and roasts guys about things they're saying now at an early age. But actually, if you check her old tweets from when she was the same age, she was making similar homophobic tweets and, anti-men tweets, etc., etc. And it's really interesting to watch that and see how she thinks it's okay because she's changed, but she doesn't realize that some of these guys as well, they've changed their views. But one thing that we have to all be aware of is, okay, let's be careful what we are putting online and how we are interacting with other people in these environments that we don't have complete control over.
Jordan Peterson talks a little bit about it in terms of, okay, if I'm speaking to two people, I have a fair degree of control and responsibility over not offending the two people that I'm speaking to. Okay, now I'm speaking to a room full of 10 people. All right, I can still probably maintain a conversation without offending anyone. All right, what about 100 or 1,000 or 10,000 or 100,000 or 1,000,000 people on social media, right? It's like you're going to offend someone and probably a lot of people. And so I think the biggest question that I'm always asking myself whenever I put out content, whenever I speak or talk or do any of my work is what's my end goal that I'm trying to achieve. And essentially I'm trying to achieve unity between people, right? Like I don't really like the them versus us. I'm trying to figure out how do we become we again, and how do we bring people together, and it's so much harder, so much easier said than done. And actually, one guy that I really enjoyed his TED talk, I think he's got a TED talk, I cannot remember his name, but he was an African American in the United States, and he would attend, he would befriend Ku Klux Klan members. And over the course of like 20 or 30 years, he ended up converting like 1,000 plus Ku Klux Klan members, including I think they call them grandmasters. I could be wrong, but whatever the head, like one of the head of the factions, he actually converted one of them. And I love that story so much because it's so easy to demonize the other side when you think you're right. And even in something that is fairly black and white in terms of racism, like that's a in the 21st century, that's a fairly this is right, this is wrong conversation. But it's very easy to take that black and white thought process and just apply that to any of your beliefs. Like, oh, how could you be a Republican? Like, why aren't you a Democrat? Or how come you're a Democrat? Why aren't you a Republican? Like, Black Lives Matter or all lives matter. Like, it's really easy to take that philosophy into anything that you personally believe and put yourself on this moral high ground versus other people. So I'm always reevaluating like my belief systems, because I'm trying to check in like, okay, even if I'm right, how do I want to operate from a point of view of this is what I think is right? Well, it's definitely not by demonizing the other side, because if I think I'm right, they're naturally over time going to gravitate towards my way of thinking, because that's just how that works, right? Progress eventually will progress to the side that's most appealing, or the thought process that's right versus wrong. So I'm actually trying to have a conversation with the other side and say, okay, let's talk. Maybe I am wrong. All right, cool. Tell me why I'm wrong. Let's have a conversation here. I'm going to fight tooth and nail on my opinion because I do think I'm right, but I'm actually interested in hearing why I could be wrong, because maybe I am.
So is it fair to assume that you focus...
That's huge.
Oh, sorry, Ben's... Yeah, he's delayed again. But yeah, keep going, Ben. Sorry.
Yeah, so I think that point is huge on the sense of validating somebody else's emotions on why they could be right as well, while putting forward your opinion and your belief, but in a respectful manner that they might turn around and say, you know what, you've got a good point. Or you might turn around and say, actually, I see why you have that belief. I'm still not 100% all for your idea or your belief. I understand your perspective now, so thanks for informing me. And that changes your perspective, which means you're just better off in general knowing something else, knowing a little more.
Oh, I think you dropped out there, Ben. I'm not quite sure what you said. But Dylan, I will say, is it fair to assume then, when you're coaching men, you focus more on helping them improve their decision-making process rather than telling them this is necessarily right or this is necessarily wrong, so that they can make those decisions for themselves? Is that accurate? Or...
Yeah, I think I'm trying to share my experience and my advice with a take it or leave it mentality. You know, I don't think young people, especially young men, respond well to this is what you should do. Unless they're really asking me, they're like, Dylan, what should I do? And I'm like, all right, man, this is what you should do. Like, but even then I'm kind of like, you know what you should do. You just want me to tell you, but you know what you should do in this situation. But a lot of it's just allowing people. This is also why I don't like cancel culture and the way that society is kind of the direction that society's headed, is because in order to grow, you have to make mistakes. Like, that's the only way. So that means, and for teenagers who I work with, 70% of the decisions you make are going to be a mistake, right? Or a majority of the decisions you make are going to be a mistake. And that's okay. Make them now. learn from them, don't make them again. That's how we've evolved to be the top of the food chain as human beings, is by making mistakes and then saying, oh, don't do that again. So I don't mind it when clients go against my advice or they do other things, because they're trying to figure out what works for themselves. And yes, part of my work is trying to put an old head on young shoulders, but for men especially, I found we need to make the mistake ourselves. Like, we need to go out, make the mistake, and go, oh, okay, he was right. Okay, I'm not going to do that again. Whatever it is. And so a lot of my work is actually around emotional intelligence and resilience now. A lot of young people are sorely lacking in the resilience category. Yeah. And so that's something that I talk about quite a lot with parents and boys, is just the conversation. We spoke about mental health and mental illness, but the opposite side to that equation is resilience, and that conversation's disappeared because it's been associated with toxic masculinity, and because it's been associated with the older generations who didn't open up about their feelings, who didn't talk about what was going on. And so we've demonized a part of resilience, and resilience is super important. It's 50% of the equation, right? You need to get up some days. You're sick, you could have cancelled, but you're like, I've got a busy schedule this week, I need to jump on this podcast and get this done, right? A lot of people will be like, nah, man, you don't feel good, so follow your feelings and just stop and stay home and rest and follow your heart. Like, it's like, sometimes it's good to do that, but sometimes you need to be resilient and push on. And so we've lost that aspect of the conversation, and we're seeing it. We're just seeing it play out so poorly now for the younger generation, that we haven't been, because I don't put it on them, I put it on the generations before that haven't emphasized the importance of this, that haven't emphasized the teachings, that haven't taught young people, and again, I'll direct it to men, but haven't taught young men, how do I be resilient? Like, how do I actually do that? How do I push on? I feel like stopping, and I've been told to stop when I feel bad. So that's what I do now, and that becomes a habit, that every time life gets uncomfortable, I stop, or I give up, or I go back to bed, or I don't leave the house. And especially, I'm just going to keep speaking to men, especially for men, the best you'll feel is after accomplishing something difficult. That is the best you will ever feel in your day or your year or your life, is when you climb that massive mountaintop and get to the top and realize, fuck, look at the climb I've just done. That took so much hard work. The things that are super easy aren't satisfying. They aren't rewarding. And you can put that into any category of life, right? Like any category of life. You build your own business and you succeed in that. You get to the top of that mountain. That feels so much better than just living on mum and dad's couch and living off of their paychecks. One's way harder than the other, but the harder one is always going to leave you feeling better. And so my mentality has shifted a lot over the last 24 months, that when I'm not doing well, so when I'm not feeling well, when my depression or my anxiety starts to kick up, what I've realized is, I'm not doing enough hard things. I don't need to do less. I need to do more. And so I need to go for a run. I need to go to the gym. I need to sit down and do the work that I've been avoiding, because the work that I've been avoiding, that's what's causing my anxiety. Everything is a chain of events. Chain of events, cause and effect. That's what I'm trying to say. Everything's a cause and effect. You don't wake up and you're depressed for no reason. That's not a thing. There's a reason you're waking up and you're depressed. Is it because you go to work, spend 40 hours at a job you hate? Is it because you eat McDonald's 4 times a week? Is it because you wake up, get on your phone, and you're distracted the whole time until you go to sleep, and then you, like, that's what your day looks like? There's always a reason. You're not sleeping. You're never exercising. There's always a reason as to why you feel the way you feel, because no one ever thinks that they're happy for no reason. Like whenever you're like, oh, I'm happy, and people are like, oh, why are you happy? They have the reasons ready to go.
Yeah.
But if you're like, oh man, why are you sad today? They're like, oh, I don't know, man, just one of those days. And it's like, no, motherfucker, there's a reason, and you just don't know it. That's okay. It's okay to not know it, but there's a reason. Like there's a reason you don't feel good. It's probably because you spent 6 hours yesterday playing PlayStation and ordered McDonald's delivered to your house and then watched porn and fell asleep. That's probably why you're miserable.
Dylan, I absolutely love that, and I love how passionate you are about that. That's super accurate. And once again, it goes back to habits, right? And building those correct habits, and also that resilience that you talked about as well. Understanding that actually, you know what, it's okay to not feel okay, you know. And again, going back to the example of me, you know, I'm sick. That doesn't mean I can't function as a human. It just means I'm sick, you know, and I might not be functioning optimally, and people might hear me and be like, your voice sounds weird, or you sound like an idiot. You know what I mean? But we have a message and we have something that we're trying to get out. I think Ben just completely dropped off. But we have a message and we have something that we're trying to get out here. And that is more important than me taking time off to rest and recover or whatever. You know, it's important to understand that, as you said, that journey is super important, and those down times where you're feeling sick or you're not feeling great or whatever, that's part of the journey. But if you stick with your habits, you will achieve results. You know, you might not get to the level you want. I can't promise you that. I can't promise you that you'll achieve everything you wanted to. But one thing is for sure, if you stick to doing what you have focused your heart upon, you will start feeling better about life in general. And that's the funny thing is, if you ignore those feelings telling you to stop and you keep going, actually in the long run, you start feeling more accomplished. And for men especially, it's really important that we achieve things. We absolutely love achieving things. So yeah, that's really great you've touched on that.
And there's the balance, right? Because it's not the old school way of doing things anymore either, which is to blunt yourself from your emotions. That's not what you're trying to do either. You're trying to have a healthy relationship with your emotions where you say, okay, I went through a breakup. Instead of blunting my emotions, which looks like, let's go to the bar, let's get drinks, let's do drugs, let's try to sleep with girls, and let's try to forget. It's like, all right, I went through a breakup. All right, I'm actually going to spend a week just chilling because I'm actually pretty devastated, and I'm going to still do my responsibility. I'm still going to go to work, and I'm still going to, or go to school. Like, I'm still going to tick my responsibility boxes. But when I get home from school or when I get home from work, you know what? Actually, I'm just going to go into my room and cry because that's where I'm at. And then, or I'm going to go into my room and journal, right? That's okay. Cool. Great. Now you have a healthy relationship with your emotions. Now what that allows you to do is you spend the next X amount of time, next 2-3 months post a breakup going, was she the one? Okay, well, no, she wasn't the one because she didn't want to be with me. So how can the one want to be with me? All right. So she's not the one. So why am I so sad? Well, I'm sad because you know what? It fucking hurts to not be loved by someone who I love so much, and that hurts. Okay, that's all right. That's a pretty normal human experience. Okay, were there there were a few red flags actually now that I think about it. All right, cool. So I need to pay attention to those earlier on in the dating relationship so that I don't do that again. Okay, also, what was my role in this? Oh, actually, you know what? I could have been a better partner. Okay, I could have been a better listener. Okay, I could have done this better. Okay, cool. All right, now I feel better. And it's taken me 2 months of self-reflecting, but I feel good now. Great. Cool. Versus, yeah, I'm good, boys. Let's just go beers. All right, look at that chick. Yeah, she's fucking hot. Rah, rah. And then you're 6 months down the track, a year down the track, and in the back of your mind, you're still not over her. You've still got shit going on. You've got some wounds. Now you get triggered. Now you're like, fuck all girls, or like women are liars, or right. Like you develop that mentality. It's like, no, bro, like you need to actually feel that shit to heal that shit, and then you can move on. And this is the best part about it too. Now you're more resilient as a result of that. Now you've actually become more resilient because now what happens is the next time I go through a breakup, I've kind of already ticked the few boxes overlay. So I'm like, all right, why am I upset? Well, I know why I'm upset because I've been here before. Okay. Am I going to be okay? Yeah, I am going to be okay because I know what to do now. I know that I need 2 weeks to just chill out, be with myself, journal, meditate, exercise, work on myself. I know that helps me. Cool. All right, now I bounce back in half the time. wow, okay, great. And I've learned even more about myself, and I've learned even more about relationships. Cool. So it goes so hand in hand. You don't want to be the guy that when the invaders break down the wall, you crumble and cry, but you also don't want to be the guy who you can just never have a serious conversation with, or has no access to his feelings, or has no access to his heart. You want to be the guy that can jump in and out when he needs to, the guy that can tap into his heart and can tap into his resilience. You want to be that guy that can do both. And that, I love the name, the modern day man. That to me is what the modern day man looks like, is one that is heart-led, leader, resilient, strong, still embodies some of those healthy old school masculinity stereotypes, coupled with the new age masculinity. I think that's where it lies, because that's the kind of son you want to be. That's the kind of brother you want to be. That's the kind of father you want to be. I've got a 3-month-old son right now. So I'm always thinking about, what kind of father do I want to be, and what kind of man do I want him to become? And so it's that balancing act of, okay, can I cry, and can I hold my partner in her emotions? Yes. Okay. And I can only hold her in her emotions because I can hold myself in my emotions. Great. Can I, if someone broke down the door, beat the fuck out of them with a rolling pin or a knife, or and defend my family?
Yeah.
Yes, I can do that too. Cool. And I think this is why I've been relatively successful with my work. Is I'm a 6'1", 90 kilo, fit, healthy guy. I tend to grow my beard out. Like, I'm a pretty masculine looking guy, and I openly talk about crying, and I openly talk about feeling my emotions, but also not that I've ever gotten into a fight, but no one would fight me. Literally, like, no one would fight me on this. Like, if someone was like, "Oh, you're being a pussy right now," I'd be like, "Okay, talk to me about that." Like, talk to me about that. Like, you're calling me a pussy. Let's go. Like, let's talk about this more. They're not going to. So I've also got that benefit where I'm able to embody a pretty masculine, like a pretty stereotypically masculine looking guy talking about emotions. So that, I think that also helps, and it's also why we look up to athletes to drive the mental health conversation, is because a lot of people look up to athletes. Oh wow, so and so is talking about mental health. Okay, it's okay for me to talk about it, or whatever it is. And this is, I'm kind of going deep down this rabbit hole now, so I hope you don't mind. But it's also why we've seen a massive decrease in. Sorry, we've seen a massive increase in divorce rates, which leaves a massive increase in fatherless homes. And the research on fatherless homes is astonishing. Like, why that isn't front page news every single day, and we're not trying to fix that and come up with solutions to that is beyond me. But so, in relation to the conversation you and I were just having, the reason I bring that up is because if I'm a young man and the only person in my life that's telling me to open up is my mum, or my female teachers, or if I go to therapy, like my female therapist, I don't have any men in my life that are telling me this is what men do. And we know that. Like, you can drill it into a son and maybe it gets through to him, but there's still a subconscious layer to him that goes, yeah, but what do men do? I want to be a man. And they're looking, and we're like, where are the men, and what do men do, and how do men behave? And whilst whilst there are nuances to manhood, I think there are large generalities that we can make for the majority of men. Now, if you fall outside of that, I think this is again, I'm kind of going really deep on this, but we're afraid to fall out of that. And when you are afraid to fall out of that, you need to come up with philosophies that include 100% of people, not 99.9. It's like 100%. And there's nothing that's going to apply to 100%. But if I can say something and 80% of people are like, oh, fuck yeah, that resonates, and 20% don't, like, I'm still positively impacting 80% of people that are listening to me. And that's a pretty good percentage. Now, if I'm in a long form podcast, I can then explain, hey, if you fall into the 20%, don't worry, you can still be a man if you don't fall into these, what I'm talking about. Like, your definition of manhood can be different,
And that's exactly what being a man is.
Exactly, and that's what being a man is. But when we completely, and this is the issue with it, when you completely take away any sort of framework for manhood or masculinity, you just left with a bunch of boys who are completely lost and looking for a framework. And like, when somebody give me a fucking framework, I'll figure it out. But somebody give me something just to start with, and then I'll figure it out. But if you just have no framework, you have generations now, two, 3 generations of boys growing up into men, and they have no idea, am I a man? When did I become a man? What does it mean to be a man? I'm not really sure. And so I think when you're able to create some framework that will apply for 70, 80, 90% of guys, that's great. That's fucking awesome. If you fall outside of that, it's okay. You'll figure it out. You'll figure out what makes you happy. And this is where role modeling comes into play and is so important. Is I refuse to take advice from people who are miserable. I don't. The only advice you're going to give me is going to make me miserable. And so why would I listen to you? So I'm interested in, like, okay, where are the happy, successful people? How do they live their life? Let me live my life in alignment with that. Oh, wow, I just got happier. Okay, that works. Versus these people are talking about this lifestyle. All right, let me follow that. Fuck, I got more depressed. I got more anxious. I got more hopeless about the future and the world. Oh, I don't feel so good now. Well, I'm going to stop listening to what you're talking about then. And I think too many people are growing up with so many bite-sized role models now. TikTok and Instagram Reels, where you listen to one thing that one person says for 15 seconds. It sounds good, but you got no fucking clue if that person's happy. You got no clue what that person's life looks like. You got no idea. And so you then take that bite-sized piece of information and you start living that life, and then, you know, maybe you get a bit angry if you're listening to, you know, Andrew Tate's been such a fucking massive topic now for this year, and it's such a nuanced conversation because you listen to him and some of the stuff you're like spot on, and then like one video will pop up and you're like, that's the dumbest shit I've ever fucking heard. And so people lack that ability to even do that, though. I'll be like, okay, I like what 70% of what Andrew Tate says, or I like a percentage of what he says. It's like, no, you have to hate him, or if you don't hate him, you must be one of the incels that loves him. And it's like, no, I'm smart enough to watch his content and say he's right there and he's wrong there. So I am smart enough to do that. Maybe you're not, but I am. So, yeah, so the role modeling where we're taking bite size. So maybe you watch one Andrew Tate clip where he is wrong, but you've listened to 70% of his other clips and he's right. So you're like, well, he must be right about this. And then you get a bit angrier as a guy, and you get angry towards women, or you do start to call girls, you know, names or whatever. Like, it's like you've just made yourself angrier. Do you want to be angry? Like, do you want to be angry towards women? And I'm using that as an example just because he's a hot topic, but you can do the same for, you know, people on the left or whatever. It's like, you need to role model people that are actually in places you want to be. And the 21st century, and I'm really empathetic towards parents and teachers and the older generations. They didn't grow up with mobile phones. They didn't grow up with Instagram. They didn't grow up with TikTok. They didn't grow up with Facebook. They didn't grow up with 15-second role models. They didn't grow up with it. So they don't know what kids are going through. And that's the first time in history where parents are like, oh, I actually have no fucking clue what it's like to be a kid right now. Like, I don't even know how to work a computer, you know, like some parents and that. Yeah. So it's just such an interesting conversation that it is so nuanced, and it needs long form conversations to figure out the solutions and what the problems are, and come again back to that unity place that I keep talking about.
You've touched on some really amazing things. One thing I'm going to say is, Ben, I had to mute you because you're playing your audio out loud, and so that will create an echo. But going back to what Dylan was saying, you've talked about some really good points there. One, you talked about relationships, and the struggles of relationships. And a lot of times why guys have such a hard time processing it is because as guys, we need direction. And when you don't understand how to get past something, that creates a lot of the despair. But when you've been through it and you know, then you become more resilient in the future. But if you don't go through it, then you just create a cycle which keeps getting worse and worse and worse, and it's harder to get out of. And I think that's something that actually happened in your life, if that's fair enough to say, right? Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the I call it and not that I did not coin this term, I'm sure it's used all over the place, but young boys and men in general are stuck in a purpose void. They just lack purpose now. And it's the first time ever, like you go back 100 years and you go back 50 years, 60 years. My purpose was to make money to feed my family. That was my purpose. You go back 100 years. Okay, my purpose was to go to war and fight for my country. You go back 200 years. My purpose was to farm the land for my family and to gain some sort of prosperity. You go back 1,000 years and it was to be a knight. And like, so we are in a very small portion of time where now we don't have a purpose. What's the purpose of men? Because you can't say, well, men need to provide, protect for their family. It's like, well, that's sexist.
Yeah.
Why can't women do that? And that's like, oh, fuck. Okay, Jesus. Is that the conversation we're having now? Like, all right. You know, like I just became a father, as I said, and a new part. Me and my partner started dating only last year. And like, the best thing that's happened for our family has been that I stepped up and took on financial responsibility for the family, and my partner will come in here and agree, and she'll say it's been best thing because it's allowed her to actually take care of our son. It's allowed her to have a really good pregnancy where she was able to take care of herself. And to me, that was the only priority. It's like, you're growing a baby. You don't need to do anything else. You don't need to be this boss babe who goes and becomes a CEO. Like, if you want to be, that's okay. You can be that. I'm not saying you can't be that. I'm saying it has really helped our relationship that I took on the role of, hey, I'm going to provide and don't worry about it. And I'll whatever. And I work for myself. I run a business. Like, it's not like I'm getting a paycheck every week. It's been a fucking stressful year, but I figured it out. And through figuring out, I feel amazing. And through figuring out, my partner was able to feel amazing. And so I just think we've progressed so rapidly and so quickly that we don't even know what the downsides to the progression are. And if you look at how we're doing as a society, we're fucked. Suicide rates are at an all-time high. Divorce rates are at an all-time high. Cardiovascular disease, all-time high. Cancer rates are all-time high. What else? Like, whatever metric of a thriving society you want to use, we're not doing well and we haven't gotten better. So are we progressing? What are we progressing towards? Like, and I'm not saying that the progression has been all bad. It's been very good for a lot of people. However, can we also have the intelligent conversation of how are we doing as a society? Can we have that conversation or not?
Putting our feelings as a society to the forefront, because sometimes, even though we don't like the way something works, it's actually necessary. Society is always going to be better. Each society, like each individual society and society in general, is always going to be better with purpose-driven men, with men that are actually able to make change. But what we need to do is, as you were talking about at the start, is find a way to hold those people accountable. I do understand why the feminist movement is important, because we lived in a time where men were the leaders. And it was working for society, right? But it wasn't working for the people that were subject to rape and things of those nature, right? And there was no way to hold those guys accountable because a lot of them were wealthy and could get away with those sorts of things. And so we need a way to make sure that for those types of men, we can quite easily hold them accountable and remove them from leadership positions and positions of power. I'm not saying that the world should be run entirely by men or whatever, but I'm saying that we do need purpose-driven men. We can't remove that from society.
Yeah, well, it's the conversation, again, that Jordan Peterson really drives home, which is you can't be a virtuous person if you're weak. Like, you just can't. So, and who stands up to the tyrants? Strong men, because we're able to. And that's not, and again, that's not saying women sit down. Women stand up to the tyrants. Good. We
Yeah.
want you there. Stand up. However, when you have a society of weak men, they end up becoming the tyrants. The weak men become the tyrants, not the strong men. The strong men are the ones defending their families, defending their communities, defending the schools, whatever it is, right? The kids, they're the ones that are defending. You remove the strong masculine archetype, the warrior archetype, and you have the society that we have today, which is the people who are in power are weak men. Like, I don't deem them as strong men. This is where it's important to get clear on what weak and strong means. Like, these are weak men taking advantage of their power, manipulating millions of people for their own gain. If that's your definition of strength, like, we're not on the same page. That's a weak man. How did he get there? Well, no one opposed him. There wasn't a strong man opposite him saying, no, I'm going to take you down and I'm going to actually lead and I'm going to. Or a strong woman to do that, right? There wasn't that. So, yeah, it's just an interesting time to be alive, to be honest, and watching it all unfold from the North Shore of Hawaii.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree with what you're saying there, because the danger is we live in an era of cult of personality. So going back to what you were saying about Andrew Tate, for example, there are some things he says that I'm like, okay, yeah, that actually does make sense. But then, as you rightly said as well, there are something I'm like, bro, you shouldn't even say that. Like, why are you saying that? And he knows how to go over the line really well. He knows how to grab attention. He's very, very skilled at that. Yeah, exactly. He's playing a game, and a lot of people don't realize that. But we live in a time where if somebody is successful, people will look at that success equally to everybody else and say, yep, I'm going to follow this person 100%. But what you talked about before is, no, you actually need to decipher, this person said something. Do I agree with this specific statement? Because nobody is 100% correct. Even us talking on this podcast, there are things that, people are going to agree with and people aren't going to agree with. But the thing is, and the thing that we've kind of discovered as men, I'm speaking for you, but I can kind of tell, is being a man is about understanding who you are and being confident in who you are, right? There's a scale. So for example, even if you compare Ben and I, Ben is a much more feminine man than me, but he embraces that. He doesn't shy away from that. He doesn't pretend to be something that he's not. He doesn't pretend to be super masculine. And that doesn't make him any less of a man. It just makes him a different man.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? But he's still effective in society and at what he does because he knows how to be himself. And so we're not advocating that you have to be the most masculine man or the most feminine man or whatever. But one thing you do need to do is not be led by your emotions. So you need to have that understanding where you can feel your emotions and understand them, but then use your brain to say, well, okay, what do I do next? And that goes back into what you're saying about a lot of men are lost in today's day and age. And so if you analyze, what Dylan has really been saying, and I encourage people to go back and really listen to what he said because he dropped so many gems in there, then you can begin to realize why we have these problems in society. And the whole point of this podcast as well is to try and get people just like us, young men, to improve on an individual level. That's how you change society. And that goes back to what you were talking about, the Ku Klux Klan guy that infiltrated that. He was improving people at an individual level. That then changes society because those people will then realize, okay, maybe my beliefs were wrong. They'll go then spread that with other people. But we need to do it on a face-to-face level rather than just a social media level because we're not really changing people on a social media level. We're just dividing people more. But if we have honest, open conversations where, for example, on this podcast, you guys can leave comments, you guys can engage in that way, then we can really draw out that conversation. And then if people are leaving comments, we can then get them on this podcast as well. And I'm sure as well, Dylan is happy for people to approach him, right? And if they want to have a call with him or talk about these things with him, they can also do that because we need to, it's good to spark these conversations on social media, but we do need to have those honest face-to-face conversations where you can look someone in the eye, where you can actually understand, okay, this is what they believe and why. And how can this benefit me? How can this benefit society? And how can this make us better men? Is that something you agree with, Dylan?
Yeah, definitely. And I think confidence is the number one trait that I want to instill into my son, because from a place of confidence, you can stand up for yourself, stand up against tyranny, stand up for something, whatever that something is. And I was having this conversation with my mate this morning. Actually, we were talking about, I think we were talking about vaping, and then it kind of transferred to peer pressure. And I remember being in high school, and one of the main reasons I didn't drink at a young age when all my mates started drinking or do drugs was because I was so confident to stand there in front of 5, 6 mates for every single weekend for 3 to 4 years in high school. And whenever they offered me a beer, I was confident enough to say, no, I'm good, bro. I'm good. Actually, I think you're a loser for drinking. Like, you think I'm a loser because I'm not drinking? I think you're a fucking loser. And the only reason I could do that was because I had the confidence to do that. And so, and I'm sure Ben can touch on his story as well, where, like, I'm sure when you have the confidence to stand for something, or for who you are, or for whatever it is, there's so much power in that. And that's the only real way that you can avoid making really poor decisions, right? Like, okay, I'm not confident enough to be fully who I am. I need to change who I am now and go do something else that I'm probably don't want to do, but fuck, I better do it because I don't want to be seen as the outcast, or I don't want to. Like, I took pride in that. I took so much pride that I didn't drink until I think I was about 17. Like, I was like, and this is where I've got, I don't know if you guys have read Ego is the Enemy by Ryan Holiday, but I actually think the ego can be a good thing when it plays out. And so, like, for me, that was my ego playing up as a 12, 13, 14, 15, 16-year-old. My ego is playing up like, I'm better than you. I'm better than you because I don't drink. That was my ego. That helped me not drink. So that was a good thing. But yeah, I just think confidence is so important.
Ben, do you want to touch on that?
Yeah. Yeah, am I off mute now?
Yeah.
Oh, right, okay. I didn't know, so I've just been kind of like chilling, just nodding, agreeing, even though I didn't know if I was still on. Yeah, I think the peer pressure and ego topic is huge as well. Like, when we had Max on, he was saying that his ego was catastrophic, like to the stage where he genuinely believed he was better than everyone. And sometimes it was a bit too much, but that's what drove him to be where he is, because he knew he was quality at what he did. So he pushed himself. And I think I'm quite similar in the peer pressure sense, where when I was younger, I'd see my mates having a drink and I'd be like, oh yeah, no, maybe I should. But then I'd text my dad and say, look, they've offered me a drink. And dad would go, look, if you want to have one or two, like, don't be worried about it. And I'd be like, okay, now I feel a little bit more relaxed. Like, I'm not being peer pressured. One, I have permission if I want to, or two, I don't have to because I don't have to fit in. And at the start, I felt like I was really pressured to go do it. And when I got to 18, 19, pressure did get to me quite a bit because I didn't want to miss out. I got massive FOMO. And now, in probably the last 12 months, I've kind of eased off on that, where I'm like, look, I can go out sober and be a designated driver and still have a good time. I'll just be a little bit more tired and tell everyone to hurry up because I want to go home to bed.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's huge as well. And that's changed me in the last 12 months. I think being able to be true to yourself, like, I can't do that. I have training at 6 a.m. And people go, oh, that's stupid. And I'm like, well, I get up at 6 a.m. I'll train. I'll have a shower. I'll have breakfast. You're going to be hungover. At least I'm conquering something today instead of having a good night. And I think that was huge for me. That was a massive turning point as well.
That goes back to what Dylan was talking about that guidance, the fact that you had a male role model in your life that you could go to and talked about those certain things made you processing things in your life a whole lot easier. And Dylan provides support to people from fatherless homes. And that's what a lot of men really need, is that male guidance, because Dylan touched on it before, It's one thing going to ask your mum for advice and that kind of thing, but at the end of the day, you really do have that thing in your head. Well, she's a woman, like she's not the same as me. Do you know what I mean? And when you can see how even your father, or maybe it's your stepdad or someone, processes their emotions and regulates their emotions and that kind of thing, that's how you really grow as a man. we grow from making mistakes because we're more recalcitrant and we don't really respect authority as much and that kind of thing, which is actually a good thing because that's what you need in order to make change. But especially from younger years, you know, we've all talked about there's a lot of arrogance in a young boy, and I'm sure that Dylan provides balance to those kids because I actually manage an artist as well who's a young guy. He's 17, right? And even him, sometimes he's really respectful to me, but then sometimes he is just rude out of nowhere. Like he just tries to have a go at me. I'm just like, where did that even come from? But we've got to realize that these young boys, they're learning about their emotions. They're learning how to process them and handle them. And we start that process so much later for boys than we do for girls, which is why boys have a lot more issues with those kind of things. And so there's so many times where I have to put him in line and say, look, you're not going to speak to me that way. That's not how, you know. And to me, obviously I'm older now. And so it's annoying sometimes having to say that multiple times. Like, no, his name's Dylan. And, yeah, so he's like you, Dylan, just a terrible person. But no, but it's annoying having to say, hey, look, you know, that's not acceptable. But then if I remember myself at that age, then it's like a similar thing.
Oh, man.
And guys, we will change so much. And so we really need a society that rather than labeling us as toxic or whatever, gives us the space to be, hey, look, that's not acceptable. But I do understand that, look, this is where you're at right now. And that's how we see better change and better growth in young men and create a society that coexists better. Because like you, Dylan, we are all about bringing people back together rather than pulling them apart. And we as a society need to look at ways we can do that better because we think we're making change. But as you said, all these stats are getting worse. So things aren't really working.
Yeah. I want to quickly touch on what you just said about you at 17. I think a lot of us at 16, 17 going through that little change, I'll say, like leaving school, finding jobs, going out, peer pressure and stuff like that, we do become a little bit more agitated, anxious. We do go through elements of depression, anger and stuff like that, and it's regulating our emotions. And I knew from that period of time, I was all over the place, but I had something that a lot of people don't have who probably listen, is I had my dad around. I had multiple father figures. I used to live with an indigenous family for a little bit. So I call him. And I can tell you what, his point of view compared to my dad's, completely different. But it's good to hear two different perspectives. But ironically, they both have the same end goal, is what makes you happy and everyone around you happy? How can you bring people together? That's what they've both said. And when we have Kieran on here, Kieran said the exact same thing about him being a Buddhist, is his prime objective is treat people the way he wants to be treated and be nice to them. Still, of course, in road rage, you still get a bit angry and just lose your shit. But the reality is it's all about bringing people together in that harmony. And at 17, 18, it's really tough to be that sort of headstrong person if you don't have anyone around you supporting you, guiding you, and being a mentor. So I think what you're doing for young people is exceptional.
Yeah, we definitely need more of that in society.
Thank you, brother.
Sure. Yeah. All right, we're going to close there. That's all we got time for. But Dylan, bro, we're definitely going to have to get you on in season 3 because that conversation was not done. I could tell you have a lot more to say. I have a lot more to say. nah mate, that was amazing. Guys. Yeah, really
thanks for having me.
Ben, any last words?
No, thanks for tuning in, and sorry about leaving halfway
hopefully
through.
Next
My
time you can be
laptop decided to play up.
That'd be great.
Man, I was organised. I was ready to go, but my God, I had a bit of a breakdown as well after it all shut down. I was like crap, I'm missing this. I'm like, what the hell am I doing? Trying to go through my phone.
You'll be watching like everybody else when this comes out. Try to catch up.
Hey, I always watch our podcast.
Good.
Let's put it that way. I'm one of the viewers, the millions of viewers.
Yeah. No, it's good. Yeah, we're starting our journey. Dylan's also starting his journey as well. And that's what it's about. And we encourage other guys as well. Figure out what it is you want to do, how you want to have an impact on society, and keep doing that. But yeah, awesome. All right, we'll catch you guys in the next episode. Take care, everyone.
That we will.